Hi, and welcome to another episode in our ongoing series of me shoving scientific papers into my neural sponge, then processing them, and then hopefully giving you the best bits in a broadly non-scientist intelligible form. I do this because you all really apparently like context and depth and knowledge, and while that's horribly uncool in our current soundbite-filled world, I do so love to encourage it. If you're wanting to grab a copy before we get to the video, you'll want the links below. Today we're going to be discussing this paper, High Energy, High Power Sodium-Ion Batteries from a Layered Organic Cathode. And huge thanks to Tianyang Chen for providing a copy of their paper so that we could try, and emphasis here is on try, to get the details right. And before we dive in, a reminder, I am a lapsed biochemist, not an electrophysicist or an electrochemist or anything in that kind of genre. So do be gentle in the comments, please. You should also know that we've got a sweepstake going at the office to see how many minutes it will take for someone to claim that I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm a woman. So please, if you're going to be a proctologist's favourite body part, you may know that you're inadvertently going to win me something spectacular. Have you seen our comment section? If you have, I'm mostly just quite sorry. We get some really great stuff in there, but we also have recently started getting some particularly unpleasant and even threatening to the point of reportability comments of late. So if you see stuff that's like that in there, please report them. YouTube has little interest in our complaints, but if viewers start being salty, it might move the needle. That said, Nikki has threatened to turn off comments if we continue to get comments like the ones of late that threaten us with firearms. Don't ask. Just before we get into this video, I'm going to apologise to visual learners. We are but a small, tiny channel with a wafer-thin budget, and while we would love to have Erin craft a beautiful animation, or several, with a cadre of animators working under her to produce the kinds of animations that would really help visual learners get more from this video, we don't have that. And if we waited for Erin to do this by herself, in addition to all her other graphic design tasks, we'd be waiting until this paper was pretty darn old. And yeah, I know we could use AI animations or some sweatshop, but animation takes a lot of time to do properly, and I kind of suspect the people who watch our videos would be upset if it weren't up to snuff. And also, we're pretty much solidly opposed to the use of AI animations since they're just plagiarism dressed in expensive venture capital duds. So basically, you've got my pretty face to look at for the next 20-30 minutes, and that's most of what you're going to get. If you want pretty graphics for this sort of thing, you'll have to help grow and support the channel. Sorry, not sorry. Alright, so we covered this story a while back in 10. Basically, to give you a 3048 meter overview, sodium-ion batteries are popular right now, particularly for grid-tied stroke stationary storage uses, because sodium is cheap and plentiful and accessible. Sodium-ion batteries use less toxic materials than lithium-ion battery chemistries, being built obviously without lithium, but also often avoiding cobalt, copper, or nickel, which is handy because while there is enough of that material, we did a whole video on that quite a while ago, and one on resource recycling, because there's another important bit of our ecological ecosystem for batteries. Incidentally, we're planning on a video on the recycling use of glycine paper, so if you'd like that, drop a note in our Discord chat or on Patreon. Rare earth metals aren't always easy to get to, since it's mostly sprinkled like garnish over the earth. It's also often in places that the current US administration doesn't care about destroying, but those with, morals and ethics think that perhaps they shouldn't be being destroyed or exploited again. Or in places where human rights are already like they're attempting to make human rights in the US. predicated on being part of the in-group and showing fealty to the mob boss. Because the resources that go into sodium-ion batteries are so much more abundant and so much more easily obtained, they have been gaining in popularity both in applications where the lower energy density isn't an issue, as I mentioned, in stationary or grid-tied energy storage solutions, and because of their price competitiveness, they're increasingly popular in Chinese market EVs, where an EV runs about $18,000 US for a typical cheapish car. That's about €16,500, so cheaper batteries are really important. Folks, if you're thinking that American EVs are so much more expensive because they're just so much safer, then what is it they say in the South? Bless your heart? You've got such insight. Also, I've got some Trump Bitcoin to sell you. For everyone who really cares to engage with this, while some countries do have more lax crash regulations, many others are broadly equivalent, just with emphasis placed on different areas. For example, in Europe, getting a poorly built box with sharp edges and no crumple zone through the crash test would be awkward, at the very least from a pedestrian safety standpoint. And in those countries, Chinese vehicles often achieve 4 or 5-star safety ratings with less problems than a Cybertruck that's been carrying hay. All right, so that's the why of why sodium batteries are big research targets right now. And the big question right now is how can we overcome some of the weaknesses of current sodium-ion batteries when pitted against lithium-ion? Namely, that sodium-ion batteries have a lower energy density and a lower power density. Energy density, incidentally, is how much energy a battery can store, and power density is how quickly it can throw that stored energy out of the battery. Energy density, incidentally, can either be calculated volumetrically, so that's how much energy it stores per given unit volume. In the US, this is measured in the standardized ratio of large boulder the size of small boulder, I presume. Or it can be measured for a given unit weight, kilowatt hours per faggot, for example. Or when you're building for EVs, you really want both the energy density and the power density to be high. Because if you've got a low energy density, you need to either drag around more batteries with the concomitant weight or volume issue that results in, or you need to make your drivetrain much more efficient. And although we've seen some truly epically efficient drivetrains, the Lightyear 1 springs to mind, and Aptera's work is also hot on their heels, but we've also seen what the market, particularly the market in North America, makes of those ideals. At least right now. I mean, not that I'm suggesting that the endlessly seemingly unstoppable rise of the most mediocre and unsatisfying format of vehicle, the SUV and its sibling, the compact SUV, is not a worldwide phenomenon or disaster, but the complete failure of the US market to have any diversity and yet manage to consistently adopt larger and less efficient vehicles, each of which is seemingly marginally worse than its predecessor, is, for an auto journalist, dispiriting. Okay, to get to the point with our customary haste, just a page and a half after starting the script, well, what can I say? We like context. What this paper examines is the use of organic electrode materials that are common as dirt substances, elements like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and sulfur. Historically, sodium batteries have used a variety of substances for their cathodes, including metals, metal alloys, and non-metals, including lead, tin, phosphorus, and germanium. Amongst the problems with these are the expense, the toxicity, and the size change that goes along with change in charge state for the alloys. And another material that's also been used is analog, or the many analogues of Prussian blue. Prussian blue is, as I'm sure your chemistry teacher told the class while you were out the back of the bike shed electrifying your BMX, the oldest synthetic pigment. And you might be going, Why is a synthetic pigment useful for batteries? Does it make the batteries a pretty colour? And no, but it happens that it undergoes two rather handy redox reactions. Redox reactions, as I'm sure you would also remember if you hadn't been helping your mum build the nuclear reactor in her secret lair, involve the transfer of electrons between reactants. Oxidation is the loss of those electrons, which is balanced by reduction, which is the gain of those electrons. It's this bit of electrochemical fabulosity that underlies all batteries. And Prussian blue and its analogues are great examples of this. The only teensy-tiny fly in the ointment here is that they're transition metal and cyanide compounds, and thus are hideously toxic. Well, no one's perfect. Oh, and while I'm sure some of you may be sitting at home and contemplating the world as it stands today and wondering if it might be useful to have some on tap just in case, our lawyers suggest that I should, with the utmost seriousness, point out that I do not condone this kind of basement chemistry. Now, what Chen et al. Discuss in this paper is the use of a crystalline organic electrode material that is electrically conductive and allows for sodium ions to slip and slide between the layers really quickly. Like our previous electrochem paper discussion, this isn't a new idea, but the challenge up until this point has been that many traditional organic electrode materials dissolve in the electrolyte. And I'm pretty sure that I don't need to tell you this, but I'm going to. Having your cathode dissolve in your electrolyte is an undesirable trait in a battery. The particular substance that they studied here is bis-tetraaminobenzoquinone, which they and I will hereafter refer to as TAC. Although it's quite fun to say, but if I keep saying it, the video is going to be twice as long. And crystalline TAC is interesting in this instance because it is structurally formed in strongly bonded layers which allow the sodium ions to slip between them and even allow a degree of movement between the layers. But the closely stacked hydrogen bonded layers form a lattice that, according to the authors, eliminates solubility, at least in the electrolytes tested. So no more dissolving in the electrolyte for these electrodes. These cathodes have also been grown using what they describe as composite level engineering, which in this case entails using hydrogen bonds to help both the TAC crystals stick together, but also to integrate specially treated carbon nanotubes. These carbon nanotubes have carboxyl groups added. Each of those is a single carbon atom with two bonds to an oxygen atom, because oxygen atoms have two little legs that need to stick to things, and a single bond to another oxygen atom, which is in turn bonded to a hydrogen atom. Hydrogen atoms, if you remember, only have the one little leg, incidentally. And it's at this point that I wish I could pop up into our attic and drag down my organic chemistry modelling kit. Although modelling a carbon nanotube would probably take up more time than I have to film this, so perhaps not. Now, the reason for doing this, not getting the modelling kit, because while it would be fun for me, it probably wouldn't actually help you understand this. But the reason for attaching the carboxyl groups to carbon nanotubes is that it changes their electrochemical properties. Well, it actually changes a bunch of things about them. It makes them stick better to other elements or molecules, it makes them mix better in solutions, they tend to clump otherwise. The carboxyl groups make defects in the nice, pretty nanotubes that make them electrochemically active. Okay, electrochemists, stop bitching for a moment. Yes, okay, it makes them technically less conductive, but it's also actually easier to use that conductivity. Please don't come at me. You're all scary and good at stuff that my squishy, definitely organic brain doesn't always do quite so well. And it can also allow you to tweak how it reacts with other molecules, so you can make them form a surface that bonds really well to, say, TAC or whatever else you want. In this case, it seems that the main purpose of the addition is to improve both the composite stability, but more importantly to improve electron flow. And that impact is seen in the results. The composite electrodes delivered 150 milliamp hours per gram when charged at 20 amps per gram. Now, this is obviously not a result from the cell level. We're talking at the level of the component parts. Now, a chunk of this paper is a discussion of band gaps, which is important because battery cathodes that are good quality semiconductors are desirable for a huge number of reasons, including the fact that if they have a good band gap, Oh, sorry. Have I lost you? I do tend to kind of go into my head sometimes. So, hang on. Band gaps. So band gaps are basically the levels of energy that electrons occupy in a material. There's a low energy band. This is the one where they're sitting around stuck to the atoms and they can't move. Think the pot smoking room full of very stoned people at a party. Obviously, this is only applicable if you've been to that kind of a party. And then there's a higher energy band. That's where electrons can move around. They're not tied to one specific atom. They can head off and see others. They're like the people at a party who wander to the kitchen and hang out, chat with their mates, and then head back out to shake their booty on the dance floor. Now, in insulators, there's a big band gap. The difference between the electrons being down here stoned out of their little electron bonces and the ones getting up to dance the night away, that's a huge chunk of energy. In conductors like metals, the two band gaps actually overlap. So electrons can pretty much just always move about freely. They're like the vodka Red Bull drinkers back in my less good girl days. They've got a little bit of chill, but they can still dance. It's great, just with a little nudge. In semiconductors, there's a mid-size gap between them. Tuning that gap actually makes a big difference to how semiconductors function. When they're stoned, which is incidentally called the valence state, the electrons are just stuck there lolling on the sofa, optimistically waiting for someone to bring them some munchies. But if they're given a little nudge, the electrons can move into the conduction band and the material becomes nicely conductive. And a very particularly sized band gap allows them to switch between insulating and conducting states, which is useful for semiconductors and specifically for batteries storing energy and can help reduce self-discharge. And according to this paper, TAC, as it turns out, has a band gap that's smaller than the typical band gap seen in EV battery semiconductors. NMC lithium batteries typically have a band gap of around 2 electron volts. The TAC electrode purportedly has a band gap of around 0.459 electron volts. Now, in lithium batteries, that band gap improves energy densities, and here you really need a proper electrochemist or an electrophysicist, but you got me instead. So, to my limited understanding, it's likely to result in worse self-discharge and might end up with thermal instability and restricted voltage output. At least that's what I think I remember from my band gap stuff, which was very small. However, it would also allow superfast charging, and I think this is what all that work with the carbon nanotubes is in part meant to ameliorate. Using their controlled conductive but somewhat insulative properties could fix this whole band gap issue, and judging by the paper, maybe has fixed this? Please, if you think I've misunderstood this, do let us know. As I said, damn it, Jim, I'm a biochemist, not an electrochemist. Alright, so at the end of the day, what did this all result in? Well, the test cell delivers a reversible discharge capacity of 325 mAh per gram, with an average discharge voltage of 2 volts and a first cycle efficiency of nearly 98%. That is, nearly 98% of the energy put in came back out. That's important, because if you have a cell with a lousy first cycle efficiency, then you put in a bunch of charge that first time and get back out, I don't know, 70%. That means that your theoretical capacity of your battery decreased by 30% of its initial capacity on its first charge. That would suck. Okay, and contrary to the expectations from our whole long band gap discussion and pointing to the successful amelioration of those cited problems by structural and compound cleverness, the cycling study suggests a pretty stable cell with a capacity of 92% after 2000 cycles. For comparison, it's typically 80 to 90% thus far for lithium batteries after 2,000 cycles. Overall, its capacity is kind of middle of the pack for sodium batteries at 286 mAh per gram electrode, but it has exceptional stability. And in comparison to, say, current NMC batteries, which have a milliampere per gram electrode value of around 160 to 220, it stacks up pretty well. But it has to be remembered that sodium-ion batteries operate at a lower voltage. So when it comes to the watt-hours per kilo calculation, things go a bit south. So while your NMC cell probably gives you something in the region of 600 to 800 watt-hours per kilo of electrode material, because they're operating at more than 3.5 volts. And LFP batteries, which tend to operate closer to 3 volts, give you the 500-ish watt-hours per kilo. The TAC-based sodium battery, despite having a higher milliamp hours per gram electrode, actually ends up returning around maybe 500 to 600 watt-hours per kilo electrode because of that lower voltage. Now, these tests are done at very low current ratings where losses are minimal, and so this is just a demonstration that the technology actually fairly closely matches its theoretical capabilities. If we take the 336 watt-hours per kilo, which again is in a battery that's been cycled 5,000 times, equivalent to around 1.25 million miles of driving in a modern 250-mile-ish capable EV, it's around 200 million kilometers, that would suggest a fairly extreme use case where this battery hits somewhere around 300 and some watt-hours per kilo, which isn't stellar compared to NMC batteries, but is potentially staggeringly long life, not hitting 80% capacity until over 13,000 cycles by the author's calculations. And look, that last bit was super complicated, and even I really struggled to get through the detail of this paper. So if this is your topic area, I really suggest that you spend some time diving into it, and do leave us some comments if I got anything even remotely wrong. But I've only, at the end of the day, just brushed the surface of this, and there's a lot more to get your teeth into here. But what it is for everyone across the world is super exciting for the future of sodium-ion batteries. It is obviously a future that is a long way from making its way into production vehicles. And that is in part because technological advances that come from these kinds of research take a long time to get productionized. But it's also because this is a fairly early step in the life cycle of sodium-ion batteries, which are, frankly, awesomely cool. And it's even going to take longer in North America because, you know, the president is an idiot who doesn't know his arse from a tariff and feels he needs to stick his bigotry in the way of all sorts of transitions, including the transition to a cleaner future. But still, this research will continue in other countries, and we will have the fruits of those developments eventually reach the US. And until then, we can just watch as the rest of the world laps up technological advances, while we in the US continue to burn fossilized trees.
Thanks for joining us today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them in our Discord room, on our Patreon page, down below, or you can reach us on Mastodon or Blue Sky. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They're part of the massive community of supporters who make this channel possible, helping us through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and helping us to remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, follow the links below. We've got options available across a range of different price points from $1.50 US a month. A massive welcome to our newest supporters: Andrew Dijak, Alex Flinner, Mark Chopping, Squire, James Higgins Thomas, Crispy Noges, Charles Noun, B. Henke, D. Vid, Maria van der Linden, Kay Firth, Scott Churchill, Nathan Okawa, Corporal Dwayne Hicks, T2 Roman, Michael Schaefer, Alan M, Peterson, Alan Badu, Omar Atiel, Robin Gee, and Nick. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your moment of fame and me mispronouncing your name. And you can even gift memberships to someone else. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at for the time being, addressed below. You'll also find links to our swag store, and if you're someone who has to shop on Amazon, please consider using our affiliate link so we get commission, not Jeff Bezos. So we can continue to focus on making our content even better and reduce burnout, we're being a little freer with our release days, but plan on dropping new content every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday on our main channel, plus something on Sunday over on TE Take 2. If you want more, the algorithm that hates us thinks you should be watching this video, but this video is one we'd like you to check out. Be awesome, be kind, be intentional, and don't forget to resist. Keep evolving!